I wasn't supposed to hear it. It was just another normal evening, another exhausting day of work, staring at spreadsheets, balancing budgets, making sure everything was running smoothly. My laptop glowed in the dimly lit room, the numbers and graphs blurring together as I rubbed my tired eyes. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Dad, a name that once meant everything to me, a name that used to make me feel safe. But now it just felt like an obligation, a reminder that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I achieved, I would never be enough in his eyes. Still, I answered, "Hey, Dad." No response. I pulled the phone away, checking the connection. Maybe he dialed by accident? But then, there was a rustling sound, the scrape of a chair against the floor, and a heavy sigh. And then I heard it. She's a failure. She'll never succeed. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I froze, my fingers tightening around the phone. Was this a mistake? A joke? But then my mom's voice chimed in, quieter, hesitant. "Greg, come on. She pays the mortgage, doesn't she?" My father scoffed, his voice dripping with disgust. "That's the least she can do after everything we've done for her. You think I'm proud of her? She was a mistake that should have never happened. A constant disappointment." My heart pounded so hard it drowned out the rest of the world. A mistake, a joke, a disappointment. The words sliced through me like 1,000 tiny daggers, each one digging deeper, twisting harder. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then the final blow. She's lucky we even let her be part of this family. I don't know why she bothers trying so hard. She'll never be one of us. The call ended. Silence. A suffocating, deafening silence. I sat there staring at nothing, my mind racing, my body numb. For years, I had bent over backward for them, for him, working harder than anyone else, climbing the career ladder, making more money than he ever did. All for what? For this? For him to call me a failure while living under the very roof I provided? I exhaled, slowly, deliberately. My hands were steady now as I reached for my laptop. I clicked open the folder labeled JSC Holdings. Inside, the mortgage agreements, the payment schedules, the ownership documents. For the past 6 years, my father had been sending his mortgage payments to me, not the bank. Mister? He had no idea. But in 1 week, he was going to get the ultimate surprise. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my father's words playing on an endless loop in my mind. She was a mistake. She'll never be one of us. It wasn't just the insult. It was the certainty in his voice, the way he said it like it was a fact, not an opinion, as if my entire existence was some kind of inconvenience. And the worst part? I had spent my whole life trying to prove him wrong. Every report card, every promotion, every achievement, I had fought for his approval, even when I told myself I didn't need it, even when I knew deep down that nothing would ever be enough. Straight A's, not good enough. Promotions, expected. Buying my first home, a waste of money. Everything I did, he either dismissed or criticized. And yet, like an idiot, I kept hoping. Maybe if I worked hard enough, he'd finally be proud of me. That hope shattered the second I heard that phone call. By sunrise, I was done feeling hurt. I was done feeling anything. I climbed out of bed, made a cup of black coffee, and sat back down at my desk. The glow of my laptop screen reflected in my tired eyes as I opened the folder labeled JSC Holdings. Property number, Panirandavadu, my parents' house. The mortgage they thought they were paying was actually in my name. They had no idea that 6 years ago, when they were months away from foreclosure, I had stepped in and bought it. Back then, my mother had called me in tears, begging for help. My father had refused to ask, too proud to admit defeat, but I had done it anyway. I had saved them, and they never even knew. Every check they had written, every payment they had made, it had all been going straight to my company. Of course, I had been covering the majority of the cost, making sure they could live comfortably. 6 years, thousands of dollars, and not once had they ever said thank you. Not that I had expected gratitude, but I had at least expected basic decency. I clicked through the documents, my hands steady as I reviewed the fine print. When I first set up the mortgage buyout, my financial advisor, Mark, had insisted on including a purchase option clause, a legal safeguard just in case things ever went south. Back then, I had laughed. What could possibly go wrong? Now, I wasn't laughing. If they missed a payment, JSC Holdings had the right to seize full ownership of the house immediately. No warnings, no second chances. They would be downgraded to month-to-month tenants, and if they failed to pay rent, I could evict them, legally, permanently. They had no idea how much power I actually had. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it all settle over me. My father thought I was a failure. He thought I would never amount to anything. But he had been living under my roof this entire time, and in exactly 1 week, he was going to find out. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Mom. Hey, sweetheart, can you come over for dinner this Sunday? We'd love to see you. I stared at the message. The last time she had invited me over, it was for one reason: money. I debated ignoring it, but then something in my gut told me to play along. If my father could pretend to love me, I could pretend right back. So I typed my reply. Of course, looking forward to it. A lie, but a necessary one, because in just a few days, everything was about to change. I spent the next 2 days preparing. If my father wanted to play dirty, I would show him just how dangerous underestimating me could be. The anger had settled into something cold, something calculating. No more sadness, no more frustration, just clarity. I picked up the phone and dialed. Jessica, Mark greeted, his voice warm as always. I take it this isn't just a social call. Not exactly, I said, tapping my pen against the desk. I need to know exactly how airtight our agreement is on property number 12. If they miss a payment, how fast can I act? Mark didn't even hesitate. Immediately, he said. The purchase option clause allows JSC Holdings to assume full ownership the second they default. They have no legal recourse unless they have $350,000 lying around to buy you out. I smirked. They don't. Then they're screwed. I exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of control settle over me. Good, I said. I need you to do one more thing. Watch their account. I have a feeling they're already struggling, and I need confirmation that their next payment will bounce. Mark chuckled. That won't take long. From what I see, their balance is dangerously low. If they don't magically find $5,800 by the 15th, they're toast. I glanced at the calendar. 4 days. 4 days until my father, the man who called me a failure, would wake up to realize he had been living on my generosity this entire time. 4 days until he would have to beg me for help. And I wasn't going to give it. Sunday night arrived, and I drove to their house as if nothing had changed. I parked in the driveway, taking a slow breath. The sight of their home, the home I owned, filled me with an odd sense of detachment. This place had once been my safe haven, the place I ran to when I was scared, when I needed comfort. Now it was enemy territory. Before I even reached the door, my mother flung it open, her face beaming. Jessica, sweetheart, come in! Her voice was dripping with fake enthusiasm. I stepped inside, the scent of garlic and roasted chicken filling the air. Everything was perfect. The table was set, the dishes carefully placed, the candles flickering. A carefully staged performance. My father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My brother Liam leaned back in his chair, smirking. Unlike me, Liam had never struggled for our father's approval. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, despite the fact that he had zero accomplishments to his name. I took my seat, my face a mask of neutrality. Jessica, my father finally spoke, his voice thick with forced warmth. It's good to see you. I nodded. You too, Dad. An awkward silence stretched between us before my mother jumped in, her voice syrupy sweet. We've been thinking a lot about family lately, she said, reaching for my hand across the table, and how important it is to support one another in difficult times. I didn't react. That's true. My father exhaled as if this was hard for him, as if he were the one making the sacrifice. The truth is, Jessica, we need your help. There it was. Mom nodded, her smile strained. Just an extra $3,000 a month. That should keep us stable. I nearly laughed. They had no idea I was already paying $5,800 every single month. And now they wanted another $3,000 on top of that? I set my fork down, tilting my head. That's a lot of money. My father scoffed, his irritation breaking through his act. It's nothing compared to what we've done for you, he snapped. We raised you, gave you everything. The least you can do is support your family. I held his gaze, my blood turning ice cold. The least I could do? These were the same people who had mocked me behind my back, the same father who had called me a failure while living under my roof. I took a slow sip of water, controlling my expression. "I'll think about it." My mother exhaled in relief. "Oh, sweetheart, thank you. We knew we could count on you." I forced a smile. They had no idea that in 3 days, they'd lose everything. The morning of the 15th arrived. I was at my desk when my phone buzzed. Mark's name flashed on the screen. I answered immediately. "They defaulted," he said. I felt a shiver of satisfaction. "They what?" I asked, playing dumb. "They didn't make the mortgage payment," Mark repeated. "The funds weren't there. As of midnight tonight, JSC Holdings officially owns the house outright." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. It was done. My father, the man who had spent his life looking down on me, was now my tenant. "Do you want to start the eviction process?" Mark asked. "Not yet. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to realize the truth." I smiled, glancing at the framed family photo on my desk. It was from years ago, back when I still believed my father was capable of love. "Not yet," I murmured. "Let's see how far they're willing to go before they break." Because they would break. And this time? I wouldn't be there to catch them. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9:07 a.m., my inbox chimed with a new email. I knew what it was before I even opened it. Subject: Urgent Default Notice. Property number 12, from JSC Holdings Legal Department. I clicked it open, my pulse steady, my breath even. Due to failure to submit the agreed-upon mortgage payment by the deadline of the 15th, the purchase option clause has been exercised. Effective immediately, JSC Holdings is the sole owner of the property located at address. As per contractual agreements, the current occupants will be considered month-to-month tenants, subject to rental agreements moving forward. Failure to adhere to rental terms may result in eviction proceedings. I leaned back in my chair, rereading the email. It was official. The house was mine. I didn't have to call them. They would come to me. And they did. At 9:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom," I let it ring. At 9:47 a.m., she called again. Ignored. At 9:50 a.m., my father's name flashed on the screen. I waited, watching it ring, letting the panic on their end build, letting them sweat. Then, finally, at 10:15 a.m., I answered. Before I could even say hello, my mother's voice flooded through the speaker. "Jessica, there's been a mistake." Her voice was high-pitched, frantic. "We just got a notice saying we defaulted on the mortgage, but that can't be right. The bank must have messed up. You have to help us." I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring it. Then calmly, I spoke. "It's not a mistake." The other end of the line went dead silent. Then my father's voice cut in, sharp and commanding. "What the hell do you mean it's not a mistake?" I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming lightly against the desk. "I mean," I said slowly, "that you didn't pay your mortgage. And when you don't pay, you lose the house." More silence. I could almost hear my father's mind racing, searching for some way to refute me, to regain control. Finally, my mother let out a nervous chuckle. "Jessica, sweetheart, this is our house. We've been paying the mortgage for years." I tilted my head. "No, Mom. You thought you were paying the mortgage, but you weren't paying the bank." I let that sink in for a moment before delivering the final blow. "You were paying me." A stunned pause. Then, "You're lying," my father spat, his voice low, dangerous. I sighed. "No, Dad. 6 years ago, when you almost lost the house, I bought the mortgage. You've been sending your payments to JSC Holdings every month thinking it was a bank. But it's my company. I own this house. I always have." My mother let out a sharp, hitched breath. My father cursed under his breath. And then from the background, a slow, mocking laugh. "Liam, you mean to tell me," he scoffed, "that we've been paying rent to our own failure of a sister this whole time?" I could practically hear the smirk in his voice. "Well," he continued, "I guess that explains why the bank's such a mess. You probably screwed up the paperwork just like you screw up everything else." I clenched my jaw. Liam had always been like this. Arrogant, cruel, entitled, a leech. I took a breath, my voice calm, measured. "Well, since you seem to think I screw everything up," I said smoothly, "you're going to love this part." Another pause. "Rent is due in 30 days, I said. "And if you can't pay, you're getting evicted." "Jessica, wait," my mother started. But my father cut her off, his voice laced with fury. "This is a bluff," he snarled. "You wouldn't dare do this to your own family." I let out a short laugh. Wouldn't I? I thought about the years I had spent covering for them, the thousands of dollars I had spent keeping them comfortable while they belittled me behind my back. I thought about my father's voice on that phone call. "She's a failure. She was a mistake that should have never happened." I thought about how they had planned to blackmail me, ruin my career, steal from me if I didn't willingly hand over more money. I thought about how my father had always believed I was weak. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I said, my voice smooth, steady. "If you don't pay, you're out. And if you try anything, any manipulation, any threats, any accidental damage to the house, I'll press charges." "You ungrateful little—" I hung up before my father could finish the sentence. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages. "Mom, Jessica, please don't do this. We're family. Let's talk. Dad, you'll regret this. Mark my words. Liam, you think you're so smart? You're just a bitter, pathetic loser. We'll find a way to take the house back. Watch." I read each one. Then I blocked their numbers. I had spent my whole life bending over backward for them. Now, I was done. And for the first time ever, I felt free. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No calls, no messages, no desperate pleas. Nothing. I half expected my mother to show up at my door, eyes red from crying, begging me to reconsider. I expected my father to rage, to demand I fix the mistake. I expected Liam to scheme, to find some loophole that would let them keep the house. But instead, silence. And I knew why. They weren't accepting their fate. They were planning their next move. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, it came. I was at work when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I ignored it. A minute later, another call. Then an email. Subject: urgent. Home foreclosure mistake. From Law Offices of John R. Hastings. I clicked it open, already knowing what it would say. "Dear Miss Carter, we have been contacted by your parents, Greg and Linda Carter, regarding the recent foreclosure of their home. They believe there has been a misunderstanding and would like to discuss the possibility of reinstating ownership. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to avoid further legal complications. Sincerely, John R. Hastings." Esquire. I exhaled slowly, a smirk tugging at my lips. Of course they had hired a lawyer. I forwarded the email to Mark without a second thought. Less than 10 minutes later, he called me back, laughing. "They don't have a case," he said, amusement thick in his voice. "They signed the mortgage contract. They signed the purchase option clause. They signed everything. They can't fight this in court because legally, you're in the right." I leaned back in my chair. I figured. "They're panicking," Mark continued. "They're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. They won't stop, will they?" Mark chuckled. "Probably not, but there's nothing they can do." And I knew it. But my father? My father wasn't the type to accept defeat. If he couldn't win legally, he would try something else. That night, as I was finishing up dinner, my phone rang again. Uncle Ray. I picked up immediately. "Hey, Uncle Ray." He didn't greet me. His tone was serious. "I just got off the phone with your father," he said. "Jessica, you need to be careful." A chill ran down my spine. "What now?" "He's not just trying to fight this legally," Ray sighed. "He's looking for other ways to make you cave." I gritted my teeth. "What do you mean?" "He's calling your job, trying to get you fired." My stomach dropped. "You're joking." "I wish I was." He sounded tired. "He told me, word for word, that if you won't give them back the house willingly, he'll ruin you another way. He mentioned contacting HR, making up a complaint, even calling the IRS to try and get you audited. Anything to teach you a lesson." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Of course he would. When faced with his own failure, my father would rather burn everything to the ground than admit defeat. But he wasn't just going after the house anymore. He was going after me. I wasn't about to wait for him to make his move. The next morning, I walked into HR myself. Lauren, my manager, greeted me warmly. "Jessica, what's up?" I forced a small smile. "I need to talk to you about something important, in private." She led me into her office, shutting the door behind her. I took a deep breath. "I need to give you a heads up about something. My father, he's going to try to get me fired." Lauren's brows furrowed. "What?" I explained everything. The mortgage, the default, the threats. The moment I finished, she let out a long breath and shook her head. "Jessica, let me be clear. You are not going anywhere. Relief flooded through me. We deal with stuff like this more often than you'd think, she continued. People with grudges, family drama, false reports. If your father calls, we'll document everything. But I promise you, he doesn't have the power to touch your job. She gave me a reassuring smile. I'll notify our legal team just in case. If he steps 1 foot out of line, we'll hit him with a cease and desist. I exhaled. The tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying slowly left my body. My father had lost his house. Now, he had lost his power over me too. That night, it happened. A knock at my door. A hard, urgent knock. I knew before I even opened it. I swung the door open, and there they were. My parents? My father stood stiff, his face red with anger. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. "Jessica," she whispered, "please." I folded my arms. "What do you want?" "We need the house back," my father said, his voice low, threatening. "You have no right to do this to us." I tilted my head, unimpressed. "I have every right, legally, financially, morally." My mother clasped her hands together, desperate. "We raised you," she said, her voice breaking. "We gave you everything. You're punishing us for what?" I cut in sharply. "For calling me a failure? For saying I was a mistake? For trying to ruin my life the moment I stopped giving you money?" She flinched. My father's jaw clenched. "You're being cruel." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Dad," I said, voice steady. "I'm being fair." A thick silence settled between us. Then, my father's eyes darkened. His lips curled into a sneer. "You'll regret this, Jessica. You think you're winning, but you're not. You'll never be anything without us. And one day, you'll realize that." Something inside me clicked into place. The last remaining sliver of hope I had, that he could ever change, shattered. I met his gaze head on. "Then I guess we'll see, won't we?" And without another word, I shut the door in their faces, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The next morning, I sent the final notice. Notice to vacate. Property number 12. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Carter, as previously notified, the mortgage agreement for the property is no longer in effect due to non-payment. As of today, your tenancy is officially terminated. You are required to vacate within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings. Sincerely, Jessica Carter, owner, JSC Holdings. 30 days passed. They were gone. I sold the house 2 weeks later, and with the profits, I started a fund for young women escaping financially abusive families, because I knew how it felt to be trapped. I knew how it felt to believe that love had to be earned. But I had learned something important. Real family isn't determined by blood. It's determined by who truly stands by you. And my real family, it wasn't them, it was me.